Good evening. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. Welcome to UT Brainstorms. Thank you so much for being here. We're also tonight a part of the Texas Science Festival. We're under both umbrellas, so thank you all for being here. My name is Mike Mock. I'm a professor in the Department of Neuroscience, and UT Brainstorms is something that we've done since 7 or 8 years. It's the department's public outreach lecture series where the whole purpose is for us to have you hear about us, and we always have the word conversation in the titles of Brainstorms to remind us, mostly us, not you, that the main purpose is to have a conversation. And so the presentation will only be about 35 or 40 minutes tonight. We're going to save as much time as we can for questions and answers. We have one of our two panelists tonight. We had a last-minute cancellation, but we're here to answer your questions. And I can tell you that what we get out of it, we learn a lot from your questions, okay? Now, before I forget, parking vouchers are available. You can get them on the way out. I'm told to ignore everything here. All you have to do is scan this QR code in the machine on your way out, and that'll get you out. So this is the equivalent of $12. So just scan yourself out, and then you're good, okay? So the other thing then is that when it comes time to question and answers, we've adopted the plan where we will have a couple of UT undergraduates running around with microphones. If you're more comfortable asking a question by raising your hand, just do so. Don't get my attention, get their attention. And then we also use this website where if you're more comfortable, you can type in questions that way. We'll go back and forth between the two to keep things snappy. And I just want to remind you, it's open now. You can be typing in questions now, even as you go. Okay? Any questions about all that? How many of you are UT Brainstorms people that have been to a bunch of these? Okay. How many of you are Texas Science Festival people and found out about it that way? Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you for being here, and we might as well get started. All right. So we'll get to that. So I wanted to start by just talking for a few minutes about what the problem is, okay? And for those of you, I know most of you in the audience don't attend UT. As I know some of you work here at UT. But I wanted to give you a flavor of what we see as faculty and what we think the problem is. And not to be an alarmist, but I think we should be alarmed. And so I want to start with that. Oh. There we go. Start with that. So this is kind of what it's like to walk around UT. It's like a zombie movie where everybody's addicted to something, and it's not as bad as this. And I have to say, just in full disclosure, I had intended to walk around UT and just snap some pictures in classes, walking around like this, and I realized that that's probably illegal. Certainly creepy. But what's equally creepy is that where this came from is I asked ChatGPT to make a picture of a bunch of students in a UT classroom that were absorbed by their phones. Now, I have to say, that'll be another Brainstorms maybe someday about large language models and their effect on learning, but that's not our task tonight. Our task tonight is that whether it's there or in the classroom, once it's making it, just make a bunch of them. Now here's the thing. I think for a while, this was, college students make bad decisions. They don't sleep. They drink too much sometimes. They don't exercise. They don't always dress appropriately. There's a lot of things about being on a college campus of watching young people make bad decisions. And I think for a long time, this was just another, for many of us, this was just another instantiation of that, right? Well, you know, here's the new thing. They're addicted to their phones. But I asked ChatGPT to make this picture because what I really care about and what tonight's topic is the way that their phone addictions affect them academically. Things like attention span. I mean, just the sheer time that they waste. But we're going to talk a fair amount tonight about addiction and about attention span problems. And I could throw a bunch of statistics at you, but I thought I would just tell an anecdote. So for the last 15 years here at UT, I've taught neuroscience, Neurosystems 1. We've got some students from that class here. For the longest time, we get a rating, every class we teach, we get a rating from the students. One of the ratings is difficulty. That course has always been rated sort of medium difficult. And for the longest time, with class sizes ranging from, say, 100 to 180 some years, there would be something like 5, 6, 7 students who would drop the course. Health issues. Many of them just discovered that neuroscience isn't what they thought it was. They thought we were going to be talking about left brain and right brain personalities. And it's more nuts and bolts than they realize, right? Last year, fall of 24, almost 25% of the students dropped the course. This past fall, just before the holidays, in a class of 220 people, 70 people dropped. Almost a third. Now, the other thing about those ratings is they get to write comments, and so you can imagine that was spicy. And the main complaints were, this is way too much work. This is an unreasonable amount of work to ask for an introductory class. And one of the comments I thought was particularly sad in a way, in all caps, to express their level of indignation. A student wrote, "We were expected to read over 100 pages of text." And I was telling that to a friend of mine, and she interrupted me and asked, "You mean like per assignment per week?" And it was for the semester. Nine chapters from a relatively easy, I don't know about easy, but a textbook with lots of figures, not just pages and pages of text. It was just too much. And we know this. Every professor knows this. Students hate to read. They hate to read. And we're going to talk about why tonight, partly. Okay, so I just wanted to start with that, and we're going to hope to come up with some ideas. Now, much of what we're going to talk about tonight, at least behaviorally, began with work by this famous psychologist B.F. Skinner in the 1930s and 40s. Now, Skinner was actually interested in the brain, but he wrote in a memoir that there weren't tools available to study the brain at a level that he would have found satisfying, and so he thought the next best thing was to characterize behavior in very quantitative and rigorous ways. And he spent an entire career doing that. You've probably heard of the phrase a Skinner box. One of his main kinds of experiments was to throw rats in these little boxes where they could present stimuli and provide a food reward or a shock punishment. And his main thing was to study the so-called schedules of reinforcement. What kind of reinforcement works the best? We'll get back to this, but in his day, Skinner endured a fair amount of criticism from people saying, if you show people these things, people will know how to use this against us. They'll manipulate us. Skinner's reply, which I always found compelling, honestly, and I'm not so sure now, was, look, our best defense is to know these things ourselves. And this is going to be one of our main topics tonight, is us versus them. And why I thought this would be such an important brainstorms is that we need to know these things to defend ourselves from these things. Okay? So, if you still think that all of this is an accident, that the companies that make the apps on the phones that get us and our kids addicted to, if they didn't know that, who would have known? Yeah. So, so now everybody's starting to appreciate the fact that these, internal memos that they knew. And then there's this book. That's a real book published in 2014. It's been called the Bible of Silicon Valley. Look at the title. How to build habit-forming products. The main thesis here is that if you're building apps, why build an app and then spend a whole bunch of money advertising for the app when you can just build the app to be addicting? There are anecdotes that if you went to Google or Microsoft or I don't want to pick on any Meta or whatever. If you went to those companies, they handed you this book and said, memorize this. This is our Bible. Okay, so just to be clear, the problem is severe, and in terms of the people doing this, it's on purpose. It's a war, and so we have to fight back. So this is the main figure from this book. This is his little model, and a lot of it's kind of hokey pokey. But the idea is basically you have to do things that trigger people to start using the app. The action is using the app. Okay? When they're using the app, they're going to get variable reward. We're going to talk a lot about this. I don't know about this investment thing. This is like having streaks and things like that. But you need things then that close the loop and trigger them to come back and make another loop through this. And if you come to campus, what you'll see is you'll see people look at their phone, whether they're walking in a crosswalk, wherever they are, every 30 seconds they'll check it, every 30 seconds, okay? There are built-in triggers that get them into here, and then this variable reward, variable reinforcement is the most addicting kind of reinforcement schedule. We're going to talk tonight about brain mechanisms of this trigger and brain mechanisms of why this variable reward is so addicting. So those of you Brainstorms people, you may remember from a couple of brainstorms ago, I showed this slide. This is HM, who had the hippocampus damage in memory, but it was experiments using him that showed that we have this unconscious habit system in the basal ganglia. He learned to play this game with optimal strategy, but because of his memory impairment, every time they brought it to him, he said, I've never seen that. I have no memory of it. I've never seen this before. So we're going to be talking about that same system. We're going to be talking about the basal ganglia again. And like last time, we can appreciate it at kind of a schematic level. We could go into all of the the circuitry, but we don't really need to. But we can conceptualize it like so. Basal ganglia gets a ton of input from cerebral cortex. So what's going on in the world? What are we considering doing next? All right. There are two primary pathways through the basal ganglia, one that fight each other. One of them excitatory, one of them net inhibitory. They fight each other to determine the final output of the basal ganglia, which reports back to other decision-making parts of cerebral cortex. What's the expected value of that action you're considering? Expected value. You're thinking about grabbing your phone. What's the potential value of that? Okay. That goes back to cortex. Those value estimates then are used by cortex to make decisions about actions. Turns out this, because habits can be just sequences of actions. This is also known as a part of the brain where we learn habits. We're going to talk a lot about the dopamine input, the so-called dopamine teaching input to this. These value predictions are not built in, they're learned. Something happens. You make a prediction. The dopamine signal might say, that was pretty cool. We should value that more. The absence of a dopamine input might say, hey, not so much. Maybe we should value that less next time, okay? It may sound simple, but conceptually, this is it, all right? We're going to be talking about then, all we have to do for tonight is drill down on one classic experiment. One classic experiment that involved recording from the activity of these dopamine neurons during a particularly instructive task. Now here's the little cartoon that I show the UT students in Neural Systems 1. It's a cartoon of the basal ganglia. And so here are the main features of the basal ganglia. It outputs to the thalamus and goes back, you would have to learn all that. We're going to be talking about this little green stripe down here. This is where the dopamine neurons are. And where these experiments came from is that people had, because a lot of what we know about the basal ganglia drives our decisions about movements. So Parkinson's disease, where there's a paucity of movement, a disorder of the basal ganglia. Huntington's chorea, too much movement, disorder of the basal ganglia. Hyperactivity, OCD, Tourette syndrome, all syndromes where you could characterize them as too much or not enough. The basal ganglia is saying yes too often or no too often. Okay? And so the time came, I think they saved this for later because this is a really difficult, way down deep in the brain, the neurons are really small, they kind of saved it for last. And they started doing their normal movement experiments, recording from these dopamine neurons, and discovered to their frustration that they don't seem to care about movements in the least. All of the other parts of the basal ganglia you record from the neurons, you can see somehow, some way they relate to making movements, not the dopamine neurons. What they did notice, also to their frustration, is they would motivate the monkeys to do these movements by giving them juice rewards. And they noticed that occasionally, unreliably, they would respond to the juice. And it was the unreliable part that I think was particularly frustrating. And then sometimes they would respond to things that weren't, so there was something about reward, but it was complicated. And so finally they simplified it down to this classic experiment, which we're going to spend a fair amount of time talking about. So this is just the setup slide for the experiment. We're going to be talking about an experiment where sometimes we'll play a tone. Sometimes we'll play a tone and present juice at some time during the tone. So we can think of this as the monkey is going to learn that the tone predicts juice. It's going to be a super... they're going to record from the dopamine neurons, and we're going to just simplify that to a graph where up means more activity and down means less activity. And we're always going to see in all of the graphs that we show is that there's a baseline activity that's in the middle. Dopamine neurons are spontaneously active, and so every one of our traces is going to start with them in the middle here, this mid-level of activity, and then something's going to happen, okay? For many of the slides, I'm also going to show a conceptualization of what the output of the basal ganglia would be. So what happened after the learning that happened. So we're going to go through three pieces of this experiment, and it's an astonishing amount of insight that we can pull out of just this one experiment. Okay. So we could just play the tone. Monkey has no opinion or experience with the tone. Dopamine neurons don't care. They don't change. They keep their middle. Basal ganglia output, yeah, whatever. No experience, no reason to say this is valuable or not valuable. Okay, so then let's start the real part of the experiment. You take this monkey, and we're imagining this is the first time that we've done this where we play the tone maybe 5-6 seconds. And then at the end of the tone, it gets this juice reward. Dopamine neurons love that. They're active. Okay, this is what they must have been seeing one time when they saw the dopamine neurons activated by rewards sometimes. Now, because this is early, the basal ganglia has learned nothing about this. Okay. Now I just want you to imagine we do this 20, 30 times. We do this enough now that the monkey has learned that when the tone comes on, juice is coming. Okay, and apparently I don't work with monkeys. They love juice. Okay. Okay? So I do this with the undergraduates. They don't like it. You probably, but imagine for a second what's the dopamine neuron going to do now once the monkey's learned that the juice comes? If you get it right, then you should quit your job and come to UT and be a neuroscience major, because it's not intuitive. It wasn't intuitive even to neuroscientists. You ready with some little mental idea? Okay. So now that the monkey knows, now, wait, what's this? Now the tone activates. It's as if now that the tone is juice. The tone activates the dopamine neuron. And maybe even more of a head scratcher, juice, not so much. And this is just a reminder that we've done this enough now that the basal ganglia has learned, I expect good things right about here. Okay? Are you with the experiment so far? Okay. Did any of you get that? All right. Did you get it? Okay. She better. She was in my class last fall. Okay, now we're going to trick the monkey. So same thing, monkey knows this. Now we're going to play a tone and we're going to trick it. We're going to emit the juice. Now what do you think is going to happen? And this is the first time we've done that. What's going to happen? You guys are a better audience than the average UT class, so they'll look at me like, would you just tell us? You got it? And here's where we discover why dopamine neurons have to have a medium level of background activity. So this is what happens. Tone is still exciting. The tone means juice is coming, right? That's exciting. But now the juice is expected but was omitted. Wait a minute, that's less than I expected. Okay? Got it? So, and by the way, we do this enough, this will go away, and it'll all reset to the way it was before, which is neither the dopamine neuron nor the output of the basal ganglia care. Okay? We would unlearn or extinguish this expectation that tone means juice. Okay? So this was all confusing and this is where one of the instances where our friends in computer science helped us out. There's a famous machine learning what would you call it, rule called temporal difference. The name doesn't matter, but we're going to go back over this and see how this makes sense if we imagine that this is true. So what's true now, what temporal difference learning means is it's a form of learning that's really good at teaching sequences, like a habit. And what's important, what the rule responds to then is anytime there's a change in my expectation about reward, then I'll be active. If what I'm expecting happens, not so much. If there's a change in what I'm expecting, then it'll fire. So let's go back through that sequence again. So play the tone. This is the naive monkey, right? Tone, no expectation, dopamine neuron doesn't care. We do the tone plus the juice the first time. This was a sudden change in expectation. All right? Oh, juice, wasn't expecting that, right? Got it so far? Now the monkey's well trained. Now when the tone comes on, oh yeah, juice is coming. Now the tone represents a change in expectation, right? And then I'm expecting juice here, I get juice here, so we're good. Okay, not going to change my firing, okay? And then of course you can see this coming down. Then when we omit the juice, tone comes on, yeah, I know juice is coming. Wait a minute, I was expecting juice. And I didn't get it. So it's a violation of my expectation in the other direction. Okay? So it turns out this is a really effective. So now people believe that these dopamine neurons do this mathematical trick that our machine learning CS friends told us is really good at training like a neural network to learn sequences. It's happening in our brains. And what we're going to do with the rest of our time is we're going to relate this behavior to the idea of habits and a trigger, and we're going to think about things over here to talk about how absurdly effective and dangerous variable reinforcement is. We just need this one experiment to appreciate what's going on here. So let's talk about this. So I had to scrunch it because we've got some work to do here. So here we are. Let's say it's us now. So we've been trained that when we hear a tone, we're going to get some juice. And so we know that the dopamine neuron does that now, right? Now it's the tone. So what's interesting now, you can see where this is going. The tone is now reinforcing, right? It used to be just the juice. So now if we played a light in front of the tone, now the dopamine activity elicited by the tone can reinforce the light as if it was the juice. And so then after a while, then the light would activate. The light would activate the dopamine neuron, and the light predicts the reinforcement coming from the tone, but we expect it, and the tone predicts the reinforcement but from the juice, but we expect that too, so the only dopamine in us is the beginning of the sequence. We add another stimulus now, the same thing. Now somebody could touch us then, and if we pair that with the light's reinforcing and on. You can see how this would be particularly good at reinforcing or teaching a sequence of things, right? So now the touch becomes the reinforcer, and then we could do on, and this is how things could unfold in terms of, this is kind of a simple example of why this kind of reinforcement is so good at teaching sequences. Now here's where it gets scary. Let's just change the labels. I'm watching TikTok videos, which is reinforcing, but when I open TikTok, that predicts that I'm going to watch the videos, and when I grab my phone, it predicts that, and when I see my phone, you can see where this goes. Here's your trigger right here, right? If this has gone on enough, your average student sees their phone, or I don't know, 30 seconds goes by, it's a trigger. This is the trigger from that model. If I pick up my phone, I can open TikTok. When I open TikTok, I'm going to get all of that reward. It becomes a habit. It becomes a sequence. It's a trigger that you don't need to be on your phone to get this. It sort of calls you from the outside, right? And the thing is, it doesn't have to be the phone. It could be 30 seconds goes by. It could be I hate this chapter in this neuroscience textbook that this professor. I mean. So if you remember from his figure, the triggers could both be external, I see my phone, or internal, I am so bored by this chapter, I think I'll grab my phone. You see how dangerous this is? So this is an experiment, was actually done here at UT at McCombs. It was an experiment about how much of a distraction phones are. So two different experiments where it's some sort of cognitive tests, where up is good, down is worse performance. Three groups of 100 UT students where either their phone was sitting upside down on their desks, their phone was in a backpack at their feet, or they made leave their phones in the other room. Now keep in mind, during this entire experiment, nobody touched their phone. It's just where their untouched phone was physically. The closer the phone is to them, the more visible it is to them, the worse they did on these cognitive, right? Relate this back to this trigger thing, right? I'm trying to do this cognitive test, my phone is right there. I really want to pick up my phone, right? Even this can interfere with the way things go, okay? So that's the trigger part of it. Now let's talk about the variable reward part. And here right now we're really talking about why this is so addicting, okay? So let's go back to one of the key parts of this experiment and unpack it a little bit more. So we're at that phase of the experiment where the monkey has been trained that the tone predicts juice, and so the tone will activate a dopamine neuron, and then the dopamine neuron is not activated by the juice. What we know from that is that excitation from the juice is canceled by inhibition that comes from the basal ganglia that says, yeah, I was expecting this, okay? And we can see that and how temporally specific it is when we did that trick where we played the tone and skipped the juice, and then we saw this is the inhibition not having to fight against the excitation from the juice. So the thing to point on here is that these expectations are very specific in time. I've been trained that at the end of a 6-second tone, I'm going to get juice. My expectation is not just juice, but my expectation is juice in 6 seconds. And the cancellation is specific to that time. Okay? Well, one way to conceptualize variable reinforcement is we do something different every time. So for example, one of the things Skinner explored is you could have every time the rat presses the bar, you could give it a reward. You could make it leaner. His word was leaner. You could give the rat a reward every 30 times it presses the bar, okay? Variable reinforcement is that on average, you're going to give the rat a reward every 30 times it presses the bar, but it's going to be a different number every time. Sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's 60, okay? That's variable reinforcement. It also could occur in time. If you're pressing the bar at some rate, I'll give it to you every 10 seconds. Oh, what if I vary that? Sometimes it's 5 seconds, sometimes it's a minute. That's what variable reinforcements mean. And we can kind of conceptualize it this way. We don't know when the tone's on. We're always playing the juice at a different time. The trouble is these expectations are temporally specific. So we might learn that when we play it here, we've learned a little bit that I'm expecting juice here. I'll do a little canceling here. But now I play it here. You can see that it takes a long time. It takes many hundreds of training trials before you start to develop expectations at all of these times. And the more variable the ratio, the longer this takes. And because you're kind of spreading this out, sometimes it only partially cancels. What this means then is that you compare this schedule to, I always give the juice every 5 times you press the bar. The total amount of dopamine that would happen in 100 training trials is much higher for variable reinforcement. It's hard to cancel. You don't know exactly when it's coming. You know it's coming at some time, and so you tried to cancel here, oh, they played it there. Okay? So it's almost designed to defeat this, yeah, I know it's coming, stop activating the dopamine neuron. It's why it takes a little longer to learn, but it's why it's so addicting and it's almost impossible to unlearn. It's the basis, for example, also of gambling addictions. Gambling is a classic example of variable reward. You don't get a reward. For me, fishing. Fishing's addicting because you don't catch a fish every time you cast. It wouldn't be as fun if you did, you know. It's addicting because, I don't know, maybe this time, right? So this is the basis now of why variable reward is so addicting, okay? So we've got the trigger. These things are designed to tickle this basal ganglia system into producing a habit. And the habit can begin with some state or some stimulus when they're not on their phone, like I just see my phone sitting there, I think I'll better grab it. Okay? Variable reinforcement just means it just forces them to spend so much time there. It's so compelling to go back. Okay? Those two things together are really quite devastating. All right, so I just want to talk about one more thing, and that I want to focus for a little bit on another aspect of this, which is this problem with attention span. Okay? And for me, I think aside from the fact of the sheer amount of time that's wasted by young people on their phones, or people my age, for example, it's that we have an entire cohort of young people now who have just zero for attention span. It kills them to read a few pages in a textbook. You're smiling, right? You see this all the time at Westlake High, don't you? Yeah. Yeah. So I think we can relate. We can find some footing of an understanding even back to our same experiment. All right, and the idea then is that another way that this basal ganglia system kind of helps us in life is that, and this is a little hard to grasp because we do it so naturally. We don't think that we do this. But the basal ganglia system helps us learn the statistics of life, like how fast does life unfold? How often in general should I expect a reward? And a good attention span is really nothing more than an expectation. You know, you're going to have to sit here for a while and just read before you finish the chapter and get a reward. An attention span is the ability to say, life unfolds slowly, I'm going to be here a while before I'm done. Okay? Does that make sense? So for example, when my daughters were young, there was this program on television with a bunch of guys dancing around in music. And the first time I saw them watching it, I noticed that the camera angle changed about 3 times a second. And, you know, and I said, oh, hell no. Because I knew enough about learning the statistics of the world that I didn't want my daughters expecting that every three times a second the world changes, right? Okay, so, and we're conceptualizing a little bit here, but we're on solid footing, trust me. Okay. So this is the world they spend a lot of time in. Reinforcement all the time. If you ever watched somebody using TikTok, if they don't like the video, 2 seconds, fast pace, reward. Things change. The camera angle changes 3 times a second, right? So they spend a lot of time in this world. There's nothing wrong with their brains except their basal ganglia is doing what it's designed to do. It's learning the statistics of the world. But it's learning these statistics. So because it's addicting and because of triggers, they spend way too much time in this world, and then we ask them to perform in this world. All right? Oops, I went too far. I missed. In this world. We ask them to perform in this world. Right? I'm on my phone, I got to sit in class. On my phone, I got to read 100 pages from a textbook, okay? And it's exactly why they can't do this. Here's a page from that textbook that they had to read. There's figures, there's not a whole lot of text. This is torture. And we should be a little gentle with them. This is torture because they have learned statistics of the world that just changes like crazy. And it takes them 2, 3, 5 minutes to do this page. And then what do they get? They got to go to the next page. Right? And they can't swipe left because they don't like this page. Right? And so this is a big part of the problem. So that's it. I mean, so this is the problem. They do this, right? And we need to find a way to have. I said, make the same picture, but have them paying attention, and they're all like they're taking notes, on a piece of paper. So this is very, this isn't real. But let's go back to B.F. Skinner. Let's end with B.F. Skinner. Skinner was criticized, if you learn all of these schedules of reinforcement, people are going to use it against us. What Skinner said was, our best defense is to know them ourselves. So I'll submit to you that's what happened here with this fast-pacing world is the bad guys, the ones trying to control us, to control our kids, got ahead of us. And the only defense that we have is to do things like this and educate ourselves and realize what we're up against. Otherwise, Skinner's critics were right, and these things are going to be used against us. All right? And if you're interested, I have to say I don't know this person. I don't have stock in his, but this is by a mile the best book that I've read on this topic. Johann Hari he just writes books. And these things, they're often sort of modestly well researched, and they harp on the same theme. You think this book could have been about 7 pages long. This is incredibly well researched. I was blown away by this. When I finished the book, I bought 2 copies, one for each of my daughters. And then I bought 3 other copies, and I bring it to class, and I offer to loan it to any UT student in my class who will read it and bring it back to me. And so I think if you're alarmed by this and want to learn more than we're able to convey tonight, this is a fantastic place to go. Okay? So with that, we're going to move on to question and answers now. One of our panelists, Dr. Scott Burkhart, is here. Dr. Lauren Dobbs, she had a last-minute thing. She's not able to come. So now here's the thing. And Scott is a brave guy. So Scott's not a neuroscientist. His PhD is in what, oceanography?
That's correct.
Yeah. Yes. So why is he here? Well, So Scott, for what, 10, 12, 15 years now? So he's had a lot of experience with students. He's been an advisor in the graduate school. He and I co-direct one of our honors programs. It's his job to one of his jobs is to help students who are struggling. He has a lot of experience with struggling students, and so I thought even though he's not a neuroscientist, I thought he would be incredibly valuable here tonight. Okay, so keep that expertise in mind when you're doing your questions. Now, do we have our microphone folks? Okay, so there's our two microphone people. Get their attention. I'm going to go to the computer over here and start reading, and we're going to go back and forth between the questions, and we're going to just answer questions until it's time to quit. Okay? So why don't we start with, who's got a microphone one here? You want the QR code again?
What does it say about the difference in the personalities that when they're scrolling through their phone, they hit a video and I don't like this, they go to the next one, as opposed to the person who's got to watch every honking video that pops up on the phone when they're doing that. Is there a difference in, or I should say, what's the difference in that type of personalities?
Well, I think I understand what you're asking. I would say that the first behavior pattern of constantly flipping through is the one that I see the most with students and my kids. I have 4 kids. I have been guilty of this. I've seen in myself the effect that a cell phone can have on my own attention span, and have adjusted my phone usage accordingly. I don't know what it says. I don't know that there are 2 different personality types. It may be that the one person has gotten better at curating their feed so that it's more in line with their interests than the other person. Yeah.
Would that be the person that watches every video because unknowingly they've got the algorithm down to what it just feeds them what they want to see?
Maybe. I do know that they collect a lot of information on you and your scrolling habits, and that they use that information to curate the media that it's feeding you, yes.
Yeah. We could frame this question in a different context and say, people vary in terms of their susceptibility to gambling and gambling problems. So some of it is just, differences. We're all a little different, right? And so some people are more susceptible to addiction. This is why Lauren Dobbs would have been, so Dr. Dobbs studies addiction, so she would have,
I guess that really what the question is, are you more addicted to it if you're going through fast looking for something in particular?
He says, are you more addicted, yeah.
Are you more addicted to your phone and what you're seeing if you're flipping through it real fast because you know what you're looking for, you know what piques your interest? Or is it more addictive that you just like, okay, now I'm going to watch something about World War II. Now I'm going to learn about, quarterbacks in the 60s.
First principles from what we just learned, the more surprising it is, the more addicting it will be. The more you expect it, the less addicting it would be, right? This was one of the dangerous things about the original YouTube algorithm, is that it intended to, if you like that, let me surprise you with this. You like this, let me be a little more controversial with that, right? It was constantly trying to up the ante on how emotion driving and surprising it was, yeah. So same thing every time is not as addicting as this variable thing. So I just read a question that this is for us. How young is too young? How young is too young to let kids have a phone, given all of this is true? Well, we don't let them drink till they're 21, right? We don't let them smoke till they're 21. I would think of a phone as an addictive, potentially addictive behavior. How old should your kid be before you allow them? Do you think they're sensible enough and have the skills to sort of to survive a potentially addicting behavior, right? We don't let kids in casinos at 18. Maybe we do. 21, no, I think it's, yeah. So,
How have you adapted your class strategy to this?
your what strategy?
Your class strategy.
Oh, God.
I'll tell you, one of the things that I've learned when I was teaching, I'm teaching it, but also just working with students, is that there's a lot more pressure to be entertaining. So anytime I'm communicating with students, I feel like I have to find creative ways to capture their attention.
I want to frame it more as a dilemma, all right? So all professors, we see this. We know, for example, how much they hate reading. Last summer, before my fall class, I thought, maybe I'll skip the textbook this year. And I got all motivated. I was going to make all of these animations and videos, and everything that they learned from the textbook, I was going to have this array of animations for them to learn. And I got about 3 animations in and realized, number one, okay, this is going to take several summers. And number 2, I had an epiphany where I kind of felt like, wait a minute. These kids are going to they're going to have to read. If they go to med school, they're going to have to be able to read. If they go to grad school, if they go anywhere, if they have a job, they're going to have to be able to read. And so if I cater to them by skipping the textbook and doing all this video thing, aren't I part of the problem? Now, I don't know the answer to that, but you can see the dilemma, right? So what do you do? They're struggling. Do we lower our expectations, or do we draw a line in the sand and say, students have always been able to do this, I think you should be able to do it too? These are real problems that all teachers and professors are facing.
Can I have one quick addendum to that?
Please.
It's good to be creative when you're teaching. We know experiential learning works, and we try to work it in, but there's a difference between being creative and being entertaining sometimes. And sometimes I feel like I have to be on all the time or you lose them.
What do you think? I'm going to pick on you. So you weren't expecting this, but
Absolutely. So I'm a cognitive scientist, so it's a very wonderful.
we'll come back. I want to hear what, yeah. So who has the microphone now? Please, go.
So
We'll come back.
With the attention span issue that's prevalent everywhere, how does society reverse that for long duration types of activities like driving a car, for example, reading a book,
Yeah.
a novel? How do you reverse all the stimuli or counteract that people are getting on this
Yeah.
kind of frequency that creates this short attention span?
Well, one of the reasons that I like that book that I showed is that he at the end he tried to offer a hopeful things we can do message, and was eyes wide open about the fact that it's not going to be easy. One of his suggestions is that we should probably make it illegal for people to monetize information, because they don't make those apps to interest you. They make those apps to get you addicted, because the more you click, the more information they get from you. And then they sell that information and make a ton of money. So, and of course, good luck with that, right? But I mean, but at a personal level, when I was chair of the department for 5 years, and so for 5 years, my days were sort of slices of 10, 15 minutes, right? And I stepped down and went back to just being a professor because I wanted to get back into science, which is what I've always loved. And for me, a lot of science was sitting for hours just doodling and thinking, what if this connected, just focus for a long time. And I found I couldn't. I had lost the ability to sit there, not because of my phone, but because I had spent 5 years learning this other way that my days go. And it took a good 6 months of intentional. I bought hourglasses. So I have an hourglass, half-hour hourglass, and sometimes when I sit down, I flip it, and the rule is I can't get up until the sand is gone. I had to resort to things like that, but you have to do something to try. I encourage students. I said, "Will you just read a book? Just read a book." I don't care what it is, read a book, right? Do you know what percent, this came out recently, what percentage of Americans between the age of 18 and 25 read a book last year? Yeah, 1/3. Two-thirds of people that age didn't read a book last year. They can't. They can't sit that long and do one thing. So I think you have to you just have to train yourself to go back to the other way. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have an opinion on retained primitive reflexes and just children who don't develop fully just in infancy to be able to, when their brains are forming correctly and hitting those milestones?
Can you just say it again? Because that was really not what I was expecting. So I just need to focus.
I don't know if we have any OTs in here. Retained primitive reflexes. Do you have an opinion on that?
I don't know what that is, unfortunately.
You don't know what that is? Okay.
Yeah. That's not neuroscience lingo. So can you explain? Maybe I could understand it.
That it's more related, I guess, to the occupational therapies. So as an infant, when children go up, the brain develops certain areas at certain points, and so there's milestones that children, from crawling to walking to eating, language, and things like that. And if they don't develop in the right order, there could be interferences with how right, left, and different regions of the brain are developed and can interfere and just cause other long-term things, ADHD and things like that. Is that not?
I hope this doesn't sound like that I'm trivializing your question, but every time I hear somebody ask this, I remember my mom saying, "Go outside and play." That's all I ever heard as a kid. Did not tell my mom that we were bored, because then you were cleaning the bathrooms, right? Go outside and play. Now, it's probably that my mom needed a break, but there was a genius in that, which is that's out there, getting your knees skinned, doing things, learning what works, what doesn't, learning social skills where the stakes are really low, right? Play, there's all sorts of evidence how important play is, that just kind of back to what used to work so well, I don't know. Now, these developmental things, I'm not an expert on stuff like that. I just don't know. Who's got the...
All right, I've got, let's see. So this is a bit off of the topic of attention span, but you were talking about how your dopamine response is highly dependent on when your anticipations are subverted, not just on when you get the reward, right? And it got me thinking about something I've heard a lot in, I don't know, kind of pop psych and such, but the idea of gratitude. And a lot of people will claim that supposedly you can get these really major cognitive benefits just from taking time periodically to think about what you're grateful for. And it reminded me of that. I'm wondering if you know about that, and if that could be related in the sense that putting intentional thought into remembering what you're grateful for is a way to counteract the effect of just kind of taking it for granted and therefore nullifying your positive responses.
I mean, I think it's a great question. I don't know. I mean, it is a reward, right? But I think, and his diagram, it said that the trigger could be internal or external. So I guess that would be an example of an internal trigger.
I went to a seminar some years ago that was about sort of being in the moment and intentional thinking. And I'm a boomer, so, I was sitting there and I'm thinking, this person was in their early 20s or mid-20s, and I was thinking, only somebody who grew up in a world where there's so many distractions would think that we would need to have a seminar to remind us to be in the moment. Because when I was a kid, you had to be in the moment because there wasn't anything else, right? So...
I wonder, and again, disclaimer, I'm an oceanographer, right? I'm not a neuroscientist. I don't know what I'm talking about. So it's just like the random musings of a frustrated oceanographer. I kind of wonder if we haven't lost the value of being bored. One of the things that I have to do when I'm working with the students now is we talk a lot about writing, and a lot of them have expressed that they feel stuck because they're sitting there and they don't know what to type, and they think that they're not doing anything because they're thinking about it. But that's a huge part of the writing process for a lot of people, is just sitting in front of a screen and staring, waiting for something to happen.
Yeah, how many of us who had to write something, how long did it take before that first sentence came out, right? It's not fun, but but yeah. They live in a world where, when you want something, it happens. So I've been thinking about this first sentence for 30 seconds, nothing happens, I must be bad at writing. Yeah. So it's a bad set of contingencies. Yeah.
I quickly wanted to offer and come back to what seems to be a theme in the audience of what's the antidote. I think a lot of the dialogue in this space is very fear-based, which is unfortunate, and I think it's put on the shoulders of the generation who's experiencing it most keenly, even though it's not their fault. So just to offer that, and
just to be clear,
sure.
I feel badly for them. We got them addicted to these
Sure.
things. So just to be clear.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a member of the Bridge generation. I was born in '92, taught my grade school how to use PowerPoint. But beside the point, I wanted to offer as an antidote, I have a firm rooted in mindfulness and creativity and the rise of slow looking. Some folks may know that 2026 was named the Year of Analog. I presented at a conference last fall with Anjan Chatterjee, who's a pioneer in the field of neuroaesthetics, and they're studying how art, beauty, and nature all have these restorative effects for our parasympathetic nervous system, for our overall connection to ourselves, our interoception, connection to others. So we're exploring kind of those pro-social benefits, but also being able to listen to ourselves again through places like nature or an art gallery. So I'd recommend that for any students looking to expand your attention span. It was huge for me in my undergrad days.
That's awesome, thanks. Just to be clear on the generation thing, I don't see it necessarily as a generational problem. I was very open with the fact that I have noticed this in myself, and have, like I said, taken steps to minimize my time on the phone. I don't think it's generation specific necessarily.
What I worry about this generation is that we've now hit the age when the college students that we're seeing now, there's kind of pre-device world and post-device world, and they never knew the pre-device world. And there is something horribly dangerous about that. It's hard to convey. Do you know why so many of you are depressed and anxious? It gets harder to convey that to them every year because you just sound like an old boomer, like the way things used to be. But before the heroin, crisis and after the heroin crisis, the heroin's bad. So
that's actually a good segue up here. I want to play devil's advocate. We know about evolution, right? What if this is part of our evolution? You didn't used to show a PowerPoint. You used to have just notes and stuff like that, and your students had to pay attention. And then you went to foils, and then you went to PowerPoint, and made it a lot easier. What if this is part of evolution, and this is all going into a completely different direction than what we were thinking? I'm a boomer too. Yes, I totally agree with you.
She turns it on. Well,
do you mean human evolution?
Yes.
Okay, so I do have a PhD in biology, so I have something to say about that. The problem is the timescale difference between the speed with which technology is using and the speed with which we churn through generations and sort through alleles, if you will. So the technology is moving incredibly fast. We, as large mammals, don't evolve that quickly. So I would say that might be one problem with that hypothesis.
Also, a part of evolution is that species go extinct. And so evolution doesn't always mean upward and better. There's detritus along the way of species that didn't adapt or got stuck in a corner and couldn't get out. So, but even so, I mean, this is where I draw on, watching students get less and less able to cope with the academic world. I've taught the same course for 15 years, and their ability to cope with it goes down and down and down, right? So, is that evolution or is that a problem? I don't know. I mean, who's going to make the next discoveries? Ironically, it took a lot of science to invent these things that now torture us, and we should be maybe a little more mindful about that. But yeah, evolution means not everybody makes it to the finish line.
I was wondering if there's been any studies done. This may put a lot more work on teachers, but you were talking about like you thought you had to be entertaining all the time. What about entertaining one day, the next day show a video, the next day they have to read for half an hour and answer questions, and then you change that around like the variable. Has any studies been done along those lines?
I don't know that. I mean, there's probably people in the education department that would be able to answer that question. I will say, like I was saying, there's a difference between being entertaining and creative. I would put that on the side of being creative and finding different ways to present material to them. So I anecdotally, I feel like that works, but that's just an anecdote, right? That's just based on my experience with it.
So we had a question from the website. So kind of playing devil's advocate a little bit. So to what extent can we attribute some of this to COVID and the ways that it affected students?
I don't know. I mean, I know that the COVID was profound because I hear students cite it all the time. And I have seen some things that people attribute to COVID, but I don't know. Like, for example, shortly after COVID, I would have a lot of trouble getting people to turn out to events in person. Nobody wanted to do anything in person. Everyone was talking about how they hated to do it online, but nobody wanted to come out and go in person. But then those numbers started to climb again. But I mean, I know it was profound, but I don't know what the effects were.
Well, they can both be true, right? They're both bad. I mean, COVID had its own ways. There was this expectation that it was always their right to have a remote option. Here's a quote from a student. Will there be a remote option for the exam? Sure, what could go wrong with that? And what's interesting is the students themselves know. So the current students, this sort of before COVID students looked at the people behind them and said, yeah, they're a little affected by COVID. Now these guys are looking at the ones in front of them saying, yeah, they're a little affected. So I think the students themselves saw that there was a dip, and now we've been recovering, not fully, but we've been recovering from that. There is still this lingering thing that nobody wants to come to class. Yeah, and we've had to deal with this. Here's what they like to do. The lectures are recorded, so they skip class all week. Saturday morning, they binge watch all 3 lectures at 1.5 speed. And you have to talk to them and say, going to class is not a box you check. Going to class is something that you benefit from. Binge watching 1.5 speed, you're not benefiting nearly as much as coming to class, following along, thinking, I don't understand what he's saying, I'm going to ask, but that is a check the box, college is a task mentality, whereas learning is something that you engage in, right? So, but we think about, Scott and I talk a lot about this, and there is sort of like the things that we attribute to COVID, and then there's the things we attribute to that nobody has an attention span. Yeah, so.
Thank you. Actually, I am a student like right now in neuroscience in UT, and like when I was born in 2006, and I am grown up in the so-called like digital ages, and throughout the like my primary school or high school, I was used to like watching PPTs, PowerPoints, and even though there are textbooks like throughout my study life, it's I have to say that I barely like actually reading through them. So as you mentioned, if the monkey found that they push the tone and there is no juice, there will be a decrease of dopamine that even lower than the normal space. So I'm thinking that if I am a student and I joining a class and found out, oh, I'm not watching a PDF, I have to read through a book, they may like have this kind of like decrease of dopamine, and I will feel like I want to reject the course. But like I'm not want to criticize this. I want to think how can we like deal with it, or how can we use this kind of decrease to help us to learn better in the future or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's my question. Thank you.
Yeah. It's, yeah. I can tell you as a professor, it's hard to know what to do, right? What's rewarding for us is watching you guys learn and the light bulbs go off and you grow, and it's so exciting to be there. And it's always true that, I mean, being a professor is partly an adversarial process, you know. Students want to have fun and drink and have more fun and hang out with their friends, and we want them to learn something, and so it's natural that we have friction, right? Always been comfortable with that. But now it's just, you know, students feeling like the same old class that has always worked in the past is unreasonable, too much work, right? So it's just hard. I mean, we're trying to adapt. There you are. How much do we adapt and how much do we hold the line? Just every day, these things whirl around in my head and I don't know what the answers are. Yeah. So.
I have a question. Right here, sorry. Do you know if why students don't like to read textbooks so much is just because that they don't have a big attention span, or that like they've learned it so much over and over again that it's just become boring at this point?
So one of the things that I learned just this past semester when I was teaching, I learned a lot from talking to students. And what I learned is that there's a whole way that they're taught to learn in AP courses. Memorize everything, memorize it again, and then during the test, write down everything, even if you think it might be wrong. Just write, okay? And so, but we're telling them, I just want you to tell me what the answer is, right? And so when you write something that's wrong, it just sounds like shotgunning to me, like you're just writing stuff hoping that I'll check the three. So I think that there's many layers to this problem, and I don't think attention span is the only reason why students don't like to. Part of what I think they dislike about reading is that so much of education theory now is that we spoon feed things. Here's the list of things you have to know. They tell me when they read a textbook, what am I supposed to learn from this? Can you highlight, please, the things that I'm supposed to know? It's all we ever hear. I get complaints. Dr. Mock didn't provide us a study guide for the chapter that we read. And it takes every ounce of willpower that I have to say, well, everything. You know, it's what we did. You know, I mean, so some of it is education theory is different. Some of it is COVID. Some of it is AP, the prevalence of AP courses, and there's a weird philosophy on how that comes about. Some of it is attention span, right? But tonight, you know, I mean, I didn't mean to say that attention span was the only problem, but tonight that was, you know, that was intended to be our main topic, so.
I had a question about educational apps. So there are educational apps that use some of the same habit-forming gamification to help us learn language, for instance, like Duolingo, or citizen science apps like Merlin or eBird or iNaturalist that both connect folks to their phone, but also to the natural world. Like, are there ways that we can say, yes, we have a lot of habit-forming apps, but we also should encourage folks to make smart decisions about how they use it? Like, what are your thoughts about some of those other kinds of apps that are beyond just the TikTok videos?
I mean, it's a tool, right? It's a really, really sophisticated computer that we carry around in our pockets. That's a tool. And so, like anything, there's going to be good things and bad things to it. It has allowed people to stay connected to people that live in far-flung corners of the country, right? 3 of my kids live 3 states away, and it's relatively easy for me to stay connected to them than it would have been, say, 20, 30 years ago. So, yeah, they're undoubtedly beneficial things. I love all those apps that you mentioned, by the way. I have every single one of them on my phone. So, I mean, but I think that what Mike's point has been is that this kind of variable reward thing, which I know about. I mean, the gaming community has known about this for a long time, people that write games. This kind of intermittent reward that you get is more addictive than the regular predictable reward. That it is being used for slightly more insidious purposes. So then I guess the onus is on us as consumers to make sure that we make those wise choices.
We have a bunch of students here. What's the app that you guys use to make flashcards? Quizlet? Quizify? Quizlet? Yeah, I have students who come and say, do you have a Quizlet? I don't know what that is. So it's what Scott said. I mean, the phone is not evil. The phone can be a great tool, right? Somebody was talking about PowerPoint. There's a lot of evidence that professors are guilty too. There's a lot of education that a lot of research that the quality of education has gone down as we become over-dependent on PowerPoint. And I feel for the students in the sense that one of the things I do is I visit a lot of other classrooms. I sit in the back and listen to other professors. And I'm a little disturbed by how many of them are professors just reading off of their PowerPoint. And I have to say that if I'm a student in that class, I get it. I don't know why I should be there, And so I tell my students in the first inning, this isn't a class like that, right? I try not to be over-dependent on PowerPoint, number one. Number two, you are not going to study for this class by just looking at the PowerPoints, okay? That isn't education, okay? It isn't much of an education, right? Teachers and professors have fallen into bad habits too that we need to look in the mirror and break ourselves. Every lecture that I can, I skip PowerPoint and just write on the board. Students love it when you draw things. It slows you down and they can keep up. And so, some of it's on us, right?
You can misspell things.
Oh man, I can't write on the chalkboard and spell at the same time anymore. I just go, I hear them laughing, whatever, So who's got the microphone now?
Similar to my mom's question, actually. But before I say that, I wanted to say my principles of health science teacher reliably, her co-teacher who teaches the same subject but for different class periods, every unit generates the PowerPoint using ChatGPT, and you can tell.
I know.
And it just decreases, like, none of the kids are paying attention. We see that you made this through something that we've all seen before. So it's not good.
And I don't blame you for not being interested in engaging in a class like that. I do not.
Yeah.
Shame on us when we do that. Yeah.
But my
You're not mad at me because I use ChatGPT to make those pictures.
You can have a pass.
Okay.
I did have a question though.
Whoever has the microphones, we've got. But
We got questions.
I don't know who. Oh, go.
I still have a question.
Oh, that was the preamble. Okay.
Sorry. Is there like a benefit or like like, what's the difference? How does it affect your brain to sit down and read something on paper versus sitting down and reading something on an ebook that you can carry around with you on your phone?
So in that book that I recommended, it had a whole chapter about reading. And it was the one that I found most. So there's evidence that when we read on our phones, even when we're reading a book but using our phone, we move our eyes differently and we read differently. We don't retain as well. And it might be something about the width of the column or scrolling or something. But even if you just give somebody a book and somebody the Kindle app on their phone and read the same book, and then you give them a test afterwards, the book people retain more. And if you track their eyes, the people reading the book are moving their eyes differently than the people reading on their phone. So, yeah. I don't know why, but that's the evidence. Yeah.
All right. Hi. So I have autism and ADHD. So my question is, how can traditional reward-based systems, which rely on dopamine spikes from novelty, social praise, or monetary gain, be adapted to be effective for autistic individuals, given their dopamine response is often more strongly tied to relief, security, and predictability of established routines? So say if I have like pathological demand avoidance or like OCD or like a restrictive pattern behavioral disorder, like I find more relief in using Duolingo when the bird's not yelling at me.
I don't know what that is.
It's a language learning app. It's really aggressive, and it like sends all these 20 billion notifications, and it really just like irritates the heck out of me, and I'm more likely to use
It's super
the app.
aggressive and loud.
Yeah.
Loud.
Yeah.
Like that ding is several decibels above the background
Because
of
like
the rest of the app.
we're not immune to advertisement. Surely, like I'm gonna say I like an S1, like train. Like if there's an advertisement for a model train, I'm gonna be like, yeah, dopamine response. This is great. But like in terms of like average stuff, it just irritates me that it's requesting my attention.
I'm sure it's bad for you. It's bad for us too. I mean, it's not good. Okay. And maybe it slams into you harder, and we should be even more concerned about it in that sense. But I don't think it's good for any of us the way those things.
Well, it also plays into like seizure disorders and other stuff like that, because I have a seizure disorder. So the fact that they're like, let's flash lights on the screen, I have a really negative reinforcement response.
I wonder if there's a market for apps that cater to people with.
Not necessarily. I mean, I've used a bunch of them, and they're kind of still playing within this reward-based system of like, you did this many days. I'm like, I don't want responsibility. I just want to be able to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, we have time for 3 or 4 more questions. So I don't know who has the microphone right now.
I do. Hi.
Oh.
So do you know or maybe think that there is or could be a litmus test that could be used to gauge our own attention span?
Well, I don't know what they are, but I know that cognitive psychologists have tests that measure attention span, and I don't know what they are. For me, it's a little bit like love. It's hard to define, but you know it when you see it. I mean, if you can't sit, when I stepped down for chair and I couldn't sit still for 20 minutes and just work on something, I knew that I had changed, right? I knew that my attention span. So, I tell you what. So, one of the things we do here is if you send me an email and remind me of that question, I'll do my best to do some homework and send you an answer, okay? And that's true for everybody here, but I'm looking at you when I say that. If you send me an email, I will do my best to come up with some answers for you, okay?
Thank you.
She'll turn it on, just Okay.
Hello. So I have a couple of questions. One is on behavior. When you say that there's this dopamine response that we get when we see the video, that we see changes, is there a way that we can think about other things when things happen so that we feel rewards for other things that may be better for us? Like if I am good to a person or whatever I do, that is there a way that there could be some thought I could have to make it better? Because I'm thinking more about my kid, trying to teach him Is there any research that shows that that's even useful? That's kind of my question. The second question is, also, I'm very surprised that coming here to UT, because I think of neuroscientists as people that like to read, you know. Like when I went to college, I just went to the library and it was just the best place ever. So I just think that that would be the case. And I'm just so surprised to hear you say that. So I just want to get a feeling for how bad it is. It's like when you're telling me this is what happens to the students, are you talking about all the students, or is it just half of them, or just because I mean,
Yeah.
just to know for my kid. Like,
Your first question was wonderful. I want to answer the second question first because the first one really deserves a good. Yeah, I'm like you. I fell in love with neuroscience in the library, right? Sitting there in the Stanford library, I went through a phase where I was reading the old classic papers, and I just thought, I want to publish papers that are become. I want somebody 50 years from now in a library reading my papers, right? So there is a romance to that, but a chapter in a textbook is too much. That's how bad it is. Yeah. Now, your first question, I think. So I don't know about what can we do to sort of counteract the dopamine thing, or what attitude can we bring to it. One thing I'll say is that, and we talked about this in the brainstorms about the basal ganglia last time, it's a form of unconscious learning. We're not aware of the learning. So we don't have to be aware of the learning. This is part of the point of it, is that if you think about when you drive home from work from the same route that you always do, you can be thinking about 23 other things, right? Because your basal ganglia just knows the sequence of turns to get you home. It's kind of the point, is that automatic habits unencumber us to think about other things, right? So, but I feel the same way. I think that's such a good question. I think I'm going to go look into that myself when we're done. What can we do to sort of protect ourselves, blunt the dopamine so that it can grab us less? I don't know.
I think you should set up an experiment where the reward system involves Bluebell homemade vanilla ice cream, and I will volunteer to be your subject.
Me too.
We'll see if that works.
We need to get you a microphone. We're not going to be able to.
I have a whole bunch of questions up there online, but they keep coming up. I'm a developmental psychologist, and the last thing that was said about trying to get the kids, it struck me that I'd like to know how many parents still spend a lot of time reading with their kids and patterning reading so that they're role modeling. Because if you have those memories of it being something positive, then that makes a big difference too.
Yeah.
Or if you've learned by the time you're 6 that, hey, I like doing this, then that would make a difference.
Yeah.
So
one of the funnest pieces of advice that I got as a young parent was a friend of mine said, don't just read to your kids, read in front of your kids.
Yeah.
That's what you're talking about.
Right.
We had a chair called the reading chair, and it was big enough for an adult and a kid to sit in together. And yeah. Now, so the thing is now is that what comes to mind is we have some friends who had I have 2 daughters, okay? We have friends who have a son, and we were talking about boys and computer games. And we said something like, these are our best friends. We've known these people since the beginning of time. Said something about, we just don't let the girls have computer games. And my friend looked at me and says, you don't understand. With boys, they will move to their friend's house. And we kind of laughed, and he said, no, I'm serious, right? So I think that's what scares me in part is that you can do something like that. You can really try to set up an environment where reading is special. Reading is valuable. Reading is something we do together. I watch mom read, and so I want to, all of that. And then if there's a darn phone right there, it may just grab them and supersede all of that. So.
One other comment is with the phones, and I'm a retired professor, and one of the things that I think is also of concern, especially to me, was the fact that if you're spending all that time on your phone, you're not interacting with other people. You're not learning social skills. You're not learning to pay attention to people and learn from them.
Yeah.
And what I found was I taught. I won't tell you where I taught. That wouldn't be popular. Anyway.
How was College Station back in the day?
Yeah, but we got a lot of kids that would come in from smaller towns, and they spent a lot of time on their phones with the people back home.
Yeah.
And didn't broaden their minds, and that's another
Yeah.
aspect of what I see interfering with education.
No question. The
Yeah.
time. So there's a atrium between my office and the men's room and my office and my lab, and students study there. And several years ago, I just started playing a game. Every time I walk in through there, I keep track of how many people are studying and how many people are on their phone. It's really stable. It's if I average over a week, it's going to be the same answer as last week. What do you think the answer is? Half. So even when they've put themselves in I'm going to go study in that atrium for 2 hours. They're only getting an hour's worth at best. So there's the time part of it too. Yeah. I think you're the last question.
Okay, so I was going to make a comment. I think you should bring back the Catholic nuns because you will pay attention. And then I'd heard that some of the Texas schools, the high schools, do not allow phones in the classroom or at lunch because the kids were not interacting, and some felt like they had to be on the phone because there wasn't anybody to talk to. So I was just wondering how that might play into how the dopamine and all that might work its way out a little bit before they get to college.
I know that's true, and I think it's brilliant, and we'll find out in a few years when they get to college. Yeah.
My son teaches, and his school bans cell phones, and he's a huge advocate. He thinks it's made a big difference.
Our Westlake High student down here is shaking her head saying it doesn't work. So, I heard somebody say we'll have to. Who was it? Yeah.
Phones are supposed to be banned in schools, but it's hard to enforce.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Many kids will do it, but they're addicted. So
Yeah.
just got better at hiding it.
Yeah. So we really have to wrap up. When I said last question, there was somebody over here that said, I have a question. So I want, who was that? Shout it.
Kind of similar, regardless if the phones are banned, they're on their computers and the screens all day long anyway. Very rarely do they use
Yeah.
from the third grade forward. And I wonder what your thoughts are about the impact of them learning or trying to learn predominantly with technology from an early age.
There's a lot of evidence that if people take notes with pen and paper or with a tablet where they have to write, they learn a lot more than if they type their notes. Number one. Number two, you know what I learned when I sat in back of all those classrooms? All the kids are on Facebook, or they're it's just they can't use their phones, but they are taking notes with And so I always encourage people to bring a device or something where they have to write to take notes. So, all right. So, Scott, thank you. Thank you. I just want to say one more time how brave Scott was to come here. I mean, I am not going to go be a panelist on.
Does anybody want to know anything about plankton?
Yeah. Thank you for coming. Don't forget parking on the way out, and we'll see you next time.